Now that is what an Ohio State-Purdue game is supposed to look like. That is Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. Welcome back to the Horseshoe. These are Snap Judgments on the podcast. The Buckeyes won 45-0 Birm over Purdue, and there was no drama. There were no major developments in terms of injuries, so Ohio State can exhale on that, knock on wood, whatever you need to do. Offense made plays, defense pitched a shutout, special teams blocked a punt. That is the most complete performance, I believe, of the season.
I agree. Not anything really that you look at and have an overwhelming sense of about. I do have some questions about whether or not the side judge had some money on this game and Purdue covering, because the pass interference on Lorenzo Styles at the end of the game was extremely puzzling, especially after letting the one that Jeremiah Smith was mauled on earlier in the game go. But whatever, it's fine. It seemed like they really wanted Purdue to score a touchdown. That's all I'm going to say.
It still wouldn't have pushed it over.
Yeah, well, he could have got the cover. It was 38.5.
All right.
But for Ohio State, this is what you want. We will obviously nitpick. That's what we're going to do when you cover this team, but probably not today.
I don't think we should.
This was a game where you saw Ohio State come out, and we talked to, was it Seth McLaughlin on the Notebook? You'll see that shortly, but he's talking about how Purdue had a bare front, and that's a little bit harder to run at, but Ohio State got that going in the second half thanks to Travion Henderson, who, again, I just really love the way he's going. Yeah. It's the dude runs so hard, and for some reason, this was one of those days where it was his day, not Quinshon Judkins. They seem to alternate a little bit back and forth, but what can you say? This is a complete performance, dominant up front, even though I think that there will be some concerns about the run game, run defense, but you have basically an entire afternoon for Larry Johnson's group where he was putting out Tywan Malone and Edric Houston getting the start. Caden McDonald, very limited reps for Ty Hamilton, especially in the second and third quarter for Jack and JT. It just seemed like it was let's just see what these guys can do type of day. So Devin Mock could be a really good running back. Yeah, he had 13 carries for 85 yards or something like that, but it didn't matter. And if when Ohio State wanted to put Ty Hamilton back in there and Caden McDonald say stop the run, then it did.
Yeah, and I think go back to September when Tyleik Williams was not involved, or the period where Ohio State has looked most vulnerable with its rush defense, which it rarely does. That's when Tyleik Williams was injured, and they did not have any reason to rush him back into the lineup today. I thought he may get some snaps. He was not listed as out. He was in that gray area where Ohio State sometimes operates with injuries, where he could have played in an emergency role. There were no emergencies required against the Boilermakers. And the reason that I wouldn't sit here and say, well, could the run defense have played better? Did they struggle a little? Did they give up more yardage than they wanted to? The reason I don't have any real concern about today was that Ohio State actually treated this like the tune-up, like the experimentation, like getting in the laboratory, the way that we've often asked them to. If you're going to put Edric Houston out there to start, let him get those reps and learn from it. I think you saw him play better, take the penalty out. You can't have that happen. Caden McDonald, Hero Canoe, anybody else, putting the jack out there because Tyleik is not involved, and having Mitchell Melton play that role and see what that drive did not look great. But if you don't actually do these things in a game, it is hard for players to improve. Practice is great. Practice is one thing. Doing it in a game is another. And I think that Ohio State, in a way that we don't often see them do, said, we are pot committed to actually taking this and seeing where it goes. Yeah. And if it's something that is worth keeping in 2 weeks against Indiana. So did it look perfect? No. Purdue missed 2 field goals, so they could have scored. So it wasn't like a flawless shutout. But I'm not nitpicking that because I understand it and I actually appreciate it.
Yeah, and my score prediction was 45-6, so I'm a little bit on the...
You were right there.
Yeah, I'm a little bit on the cusp, but no, you're absolutely right. And it's about seeing, how does this look with CJ Hooks out there? How does this look with Mitchell Melton out there? Caden Curry got a ton of reps today and is awesome. I mean, if you want to know... you probably won't see it, America, because I don't post a photo gallery really anymore from these games. But I have a photo in the fourth quarter, Ohio State at 45-0, and Caden Curry full extension laid out trying to make a tackle in the backfield, horizontal to the ground. And that's just the type of stuff that it changes the way teams operate when you have a guy that is that passionate and that emotional. He gets the block punt early. That sort of sets the game off. I guess if I have a thought about the run defense, it's hard to sit here in the first half when it's 14-0 at halftime or 21-0 at halftime after the late touchdown to Jeremiah Smith. But 3 possessions. One of them's an 8-yard possession, and you're like, man, you got to just get off the field at some point to get the ball back. But that's where it is more important for Ohio State to get reps for Edric Houston and Caden McDonald and even Taiwan Malone than it is, in my opinion, to win 66-0.
I do. It's possible, and it did not play out this way. So you don't have to even worry about it. That maybe the hesitancy that the Ohio State coaching staff has had before, that is like, we'll get to halftime, and then maybe, if these guys have taken care of business and it's a 4 or 5 possession game, cool. Then the backups can come in. I mean, these were real live reps. It's a bad Big Ten team, but it is a Big Ten team, and it was a close game. So you're going to learn a lot more about it, and some of it can be not perfect. Some of it can be really encouraging. It doesn't matter, but you needed to find out. And I think Ohio State, on both sides of the ball, really, because they did this at wide receiver, taking Jeremiah Smith out relatively early. They were playing Bryson Rogers in the first half. They were, giving some opportunities to Brandon Ennis.
Brandon Ennis was lined up in the backfield next to Will Howard, I think, on Ohio State's first drive of the game. So definitely they're doing different things. Travion Henderson returning kicks today. It was definitely a day where Ohio State was experimenting way more than we've seen.
So, and you can do that when you're confident that you're going to go win a game no matter what. I was saying, maybe the reticence in the past is, well, what if you then put yourself in a position because you don't play the cleanest half of football and it's only 14 or 21-0, and then you have to make a decision with what you want to do in the starters coming out of the locker room. Ohio State did this in the first half, and yes, it was only 21-0, but they were willing to take those chances in a way. If it had been 14-7, if they had not, forced the missed field goal, would they have continued throughout that same path in the second quarter? I don't know. But they were willing to live with the outcome because in the end, they knew there was very little chance that Purdue was going to be able to take this game into the fourth quarter with them or even the third quarter.
Yeah, and I think there's some credit due to the Ohio State staff. We made a comment on Tuesday about Ryan Day intentionally bringing up Purdue multiple times, and that's really rare for him to do, to not make it about Ohio State. It's not, this is about us, it's not about who we're playing. Was intentional. I asked him after his press conference, I said, was that intentional? He said, absolutely. He said, there have been teams around the country every week that you see coming off a big game that they all of a sudden just get sniped. And then I said, oh, Miami lost. And he said, see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly why we were so focused on Purdue, wanting to put guys in positions to do things that were going to keep them engaged in the game. And I think that's a big part of it. If you're a young guy in this game getting an opportunity to play, you're going to be jacked up. You're going to be out there pretty juiced. So it is different than putting in all the old heads and letting them just play 3 straight quarters. It makes sense to do it the way they did. And, I was wanting to pull my hair out at times when you watch 13 yards up the middle, 9 yards up the middle, but it's better to get these reps for these young guys now in this game. And I think they could have probably done a better job with that on offense, to be honest. I think James Peoples probably should have been in the third quarter, but that's nitpicking and irrelevant. So
they did what they had to do. They did have a momentary scare with Carson Hinsman there right before halftime. It looked like he wanted to go back into the game at least 2 plays later.
They scored 2 plays later, so he didn't have to.
Well, he was saying, but he was prepared as if he was going to return, and then Jeremiah Smith said, "No, that's not necessary. I'm going to go ahead and take this little crossing route to the end zone." Breaking another record, he holds the Triple Crown. He's got the most receptions, the most receiving yards, and the most touchdowns of a true freshman in Ohio State history. And he still has 3 regular season games left. This is not news, Berm, but he's really, really good at football.
Yeah, you can't cover him. I mean, again, I was talking in jest about the call that he did not get earlier in the game when he was absolutely mugged on the sideline on a long out route by Will Howard. But Purdue is not going to be able to cover Jeremiah Smith, and he just did whatever he wanted. I think from Ohio State, sometimes the challenge is when you have this get out of jail free card at time. I mean, it's the second drive of the game for Ohio State, right? So Will Howard, or third drive of the game after at 7-0. Will Howard takes a sack on first down. Not a sack. They run the end around to Quinshon Judkins for some reason. Lose 8 yards. They 2nd and 18. They run a little tunnel screen for a yard that just made no sense. just get vertical. Like, just go vertical. You have the best athletes, and just go vertical. Yeah. They can't stop you. Whatever. So then it's the 3rd and 17 play, and you're like, oh, just throw it to Jeremiah, and he half a yard short on the route, but like, you can just always get out of jail free. And I think there is a bit of a problem sometimes when you're like, well, let's just mess around and find out. So, but whatever. He's really good. I saw Ohio State trying to get the ball to Emeka Egbuka in the 3rd quarter and 4th quarter, and they got them in a touchdown. But like, I think they're just sometimes like, you don't want to forget about all the other guys you have.
I do think sometimes it feels, maybe this, I'm sure that Chip Kelly would disagree, that they box themselves in a little bit by thinking, well, Emeka is the most versatile. He can do any of the gadget things, and you can run the tunnel screens, or you can end around pop pass, jet sweep, whatever with him. And they're like, it feels like at times like they forget that he could just go do the same things.
Be a receiver.
That Jeremiah Smith can. Like, he is an elite wide receiver. And again, it sounds like we're veering into nitpicking territory. No. And I don't want to live there in a game that's 45-0.
No, but it's not about the game. It's about just the big picture.
When you're looking forward, like, how is that offense going to look? But it is amazing when this team, with that array of skill position talent, and with Will Howard and the short and intermediate stuff, and I think people will look at the deep throw to Carnell Tate, and it was underthrown a little bit, and they'll this week will probably bring up some of the same questions again. I heard folks in the press box talking about it in real time. But then he bounces back with like just the most pinpoint throws that you can make on the short and intermediate stuff. Like, he's almost like, no one is perfect. He might be the closest. For anything under 20 yards, I feel like he's going to make the right decision, and the ball is going to be put in a spot that only an Ohio State wide receiver can catch it.
He's been great. I will say, and I know people will say I'm making an excuse for him. It was a weird wind in here today. Like, it was like kind of swirling, and it was blowing back in the face of like, so the ball that he threw to Carnell, it was like higher in the stadium, so it wasn't on the field, but it did get up. So, I mean, Purdue missed a 20-yard field goal. And something was weird. You don't just miss a 20-yard field goal. But no, this is not a complaining show. This is a dominant win. You get out of here healthy as you came in, which is vital, important. You get an opportunity to learn a lot about young guys. I think Edric Houston's the one to me that you're going to hear the most about this week because, yeah, I thought he played pretty well, but again, he's moving inside from the defensive end spot. It makes sense that he may not look exactly like Ty Hamilton in run defense or Tyleik Williams in run defense, but you saw flashes of what he can do. You also saw flashes of being a freshman because when you get a big sack and somebody from the other team pushes you, you just don't push back.
You head to the sideline. And he'll learn.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's any reason to think he won't. He's been taking the coaching, I think, pretty well.
He's just an exceptionally smart kid. He will not make that mistake again. I was interested just to see how Ohio State would respond to that. And he was not out there like immediately the next couple of plays, but he did get back in, shortly thereafter and played fine. So if there's other guys on this team that I'm constantly looking at, like, man, I just want to know how you get more reps for that. Like Gabe Powers, dude, every time Gabe Powers is on the field, the minute he gets out there, he murders someone.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, Gabe Powers. Every time and I just don't know how you get him more reps because because Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese and Cody Simon are all playing so well. But man, Gabe Powers has really opened my eyes to like what the linebacker room can be next year.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask you who made the most of their reps today because like there were a bunch of guys who got opportunities that, and as we said right off the top there with snap judgments that they gave them snaps, they trusted them to work through it, and maybe there were going to be learning experiences. You said Edric Houston. Is there anyone else who stood out to you as like really flashing and making the most of that?
It's not flashing, but it's just proving how solid you are. And it's Jalen McLean. Like the guy doesn't seem to be out of position very often, if at all. I thought Malik Hartford played a good game for a guy.
That's the best he's played.
Yeah, he hasn't played a lot, but he played pretty well in his time. And ultimately, I thought, Caden Curry I already mentioned. I just think you have to get the guy on the field. Things happen when he's on the field. I know you have two really good players in Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau who played a good game today. Both of them did. Jack picking up the fumble that JT caused, like that's awesome. But I thought Aaron Scott did, and I know he got called for a PI. No, that was Lorenzo Styles.
Aaron got hurt on that last play down here.
But Aaron had a play on the sideline, did pretty well. He looks very comfortable in coverage. If I'm looking ahead and I'm like, man, it's very interesting to see what these teams are doing against Ohio State on defense, because there is a confidence around the Big Ten, it seems, to throw on Denzel Burke and Davis Igbinosun that I did not anticipate early in the season. And it's just something to keep an eye on for Indiana, because they have a couple bigger receivers and
a veteran quarterback.
And a veteran quarterback that has really good touch. And so it's just, we saw Dylan Raiola make that throw where you just stop and throw it a couple times. And even today we saw Hudson Card make it, and the one that got overturned and ruled a catch. But like, those aren't situations.
You also had another defensive pass interference on Davis Igbinosun.
Those aren't situations where Ohio State's in bad position. Again, I don't know that really. I was watching that play through my camera, but like after he threw it. So unless that,
the IGB,
yeah,
it was.
So was it before the break? Like, because it didn't look like
it was sustained.
Okay, cool. But whatever. Latham Ransom bailed him out on the next play. So,
sure did. Yep.
There's at least a little bit of like an antenna in my head going, yeah, that's interesting, because something seems amiss in the way that they're covering on the outside. And to that point, every time I see Jermaine Matthews on the field, I want more Jermaine Matthews.
I was going to say Jermaine Matthews, but I think everyone who watches the podcast knows that I already have been living in that world for quite some time. But he's just on the rise, and I think Ohio State's aware of that.
Yeah, that's why he's been on the field a lot more the last 3 weeks.
Yeah. All right, so that covers a lot of ground. Is there anything else that you left with on a perfect November Saturday? I mean, my goodness, we're still out here.
No, I'm really looking forward to a game where both Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson get back into a rhythm early. And I know that's probably pretty hard to do for Carlos Lockwin, because they're very different styles of running backs. But when you see Travion has 6 carries for 85 yards and Quinshon's got 11 for 40, you're like, but I don't know how you balance it. But ultimately it doesn't matter, because you just have other weapons you can just give it.
Well, I mean, I think they were trying. We saw them in the backfield at the same time, and the end around for Quinshon Judkins was, had supposed to be Travion Henderson and I think maybe G. Scott lead blocking for him, and they missed, and like he lost 8 yards right there. Like, that's not going to make up the difference between what you're talking about with Travion's production today. But like, Ohio State was clearly trying to do some of these things and bring more wrinkles. Still doing that with the offense. G. Scott's touchdown I thought was really cool, sort of a delayed throwback where G. Scott's holding it in the line, and Travion ran off the coverage, and this wide open space opens up. Like, they're doing things now that we definitely didn't see 2 weeks ago, and it's exciting to see where it's going, because we're seeing new stuff again every week, which has not really been the case for this offense in a while.
Yeah, when you're leaving a game 45-0, you're heading to Chicago to play Northwestern next week. Obviously, it's going to be but there's nothing that you leave this game with and go, oh boy, it's a real concern down the road. But there's always going to be things that pop up, and but for Ohio State, like, this is now a look ahead. You got to get ready for what is Indiana going to do. I don't know what score is in that game right now. They're playing Michigan currently. We'll see what they're like against a physical front, but I think Ohio State is developing depth on defense, super important, and that's not just on the defensive line. Again, that's Jermaine Matthews, it's Lorenzo Styles playing a lot more. That's a lot of things that the Buckeyes are doing, and that's what you have to do heading into November and late November. And if you can do that while winning 45-0, that's pretty good too.
Yep, comprehensive performance. And again, special teams was involved in that. Shout outs to Caden Curry and Mitchell Melton and Rob Keys, who got a big celebration, big hug from Ryan Day. They were talking on the sideline. The adjustment there, get some bigger bodies involved to run into the shield protectors. Yep. And guess what? It worked, because Caden Curry is an animal. And every time he's out there, he's going to run through a wall, let alone a human being. So that was key. It sparked the win for Ohio State early on, and they did not look back. 45-0. Huge win for the Buckeyes. They improved to 8-1. They are still in control of their destiny in the Big Ten championship race. They are heading next Saturday to Wrigley Field to play a football game.
We can't wait.
Against Northwestern. It's going to start at 11 a.m. Central Time. It is a noon kickoff Eastern on BTN. And if you didn't know already, and we've been preparing you, big noon kickoff will be here for Indiana. And the game is at noon as well. So just set your clock, set your alarm every week.
To noon.
Buckeyes are going to be playing at noon. That's just what they do. They did that again today, and they won easily. These have been snap judgments talking about 45-0 Ohio State beating Purdue. He is Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We'll see y'all tomorrow.